Warner Bros. Looks around frantically after every writer attached to the Jon Snow sequel bails on writing the movie/show, and they spot this dumb YouTuber who hasn't seen sunlight for 3 months. We're out of options, they say. Let's get this random guy to pitch us the show for a Starbucks gift card. With the recent news that Warner Bros. Is working on a Game of Thrones movie, I thought it could be fun to try and pitch the Jon Snow sequel, even though it could technically be an Arya spinoff. And along the way, we'll go through the whole process of writing and general story fundamentals. Now, you may be immediately thinking, why the hell would you want to continue his story after it had a rather conclusive ending? To which, I'd say you're 100% correct, but after writing this pitch, I think I discovered a genuinely good story, and I'm excited to tell you guys about it. The first order of business is laying down the basic foundations and establishing the setting. It's obviously going to be beyond the wall, but I think the story would operate the best if about 5 years has passed since the ending of Game of Thrones. The reason being that we come back into the story and there's more intrigue since our characters have changed and their surrounding circumstances. Among other reasons I'll get into later. Jon could be more relaxed, he started a community, and he's finally in a state where he's content with life. You can even introduce a new love interest for Jon, which I think could offer an interesting point of internal struggle since there'll undoubtedly be mirrors between this new love interest and Ygritte. Personally, I think it would be best if this relationship isn't that far along in terms of having kids, so that we can explore and witness Jon come to terms with trying to love someone else after so much past trauma. But this obviously isn't the main draw, and I'll quickly accelerate to what the premise of the story is. When Jon and Tormund are out hunting for food one day, they get snowed in and have to take shelter in a nearby cave. They discover that this cave is actually being lived in and is being occupied by the last remaining children of the forest, or child of the forest. I think it's plausible that not all of them died in the Three-Eyed Raven's lair, and one was able to hide or escape through another tunnel, since the Night King had all of his focus on Bran. From here, the opportunities kind of exponentially uptick for where you can take the story. You may be immediately thinking, uh-oh, is Supercuts Delight about to suggest bringing back the undead threat by using the Child of the Forest as an exposition plot device to set up more conflict of the undead returning? No, I'm not. I think it would be kind of cheap narratively to just be like, yeah, there's still randomly more White Walkers in the lands of Always Winter or wherever this place is. That'd be like pulling a Rise of Skywalker where somehow the undead return. The Long Night was definitely underwhelming, and I'd love to explore the questions that still remain surrounding the undead, but doing that in a retcon fashion is inherently the wrong way of going about it. You could come up with some reason why they come back, like maybe the White Walker baby was still alive, but then the whole idea of the Night King dying and undoing everything he did wouldn't make sense. The direction I want to take instead is putting more of a focus on the Child of the Forest. I think exploring him or her has a lot of potential, and reintegrating the child into the Free Folk society could have some interesting implications. We never really got to see them that much since Bran was in limbo for season 5, and David and Dan made practically no attempts at characterizing them or making them be anything outside of tools for carrying out exposition. They were simplified into just creating the Night King, and that's something I'd like to repair through this series. Going back to the plot, let's skip ahead a bit to where I think the real meat of the story is in terms of the major point of conflict, which is Jon sending a raven to Bran, informing him that he found the last remaining child of the forest. This could be at the end of episode 2 or 3, or act 2 of the movie, where a little bit of time has passed, and we've explored some scenes with the Child of the Forest in this new environment. Bran's reaction to this letter I think could be really interesting, because Bran knows how the Night King was created, so he'll most likely see that this last child of the forest could be a major threat. Human conflict in general, and especially human conflict versus another species, is practically inevitable. This is something that Bran could see throughout history in his flashbacks. Then, on Jon's side of the narrative, This would be reinforced by the child of the forest being partially rejected and seen as this outcast when being introduced to the free folk community. Although, I think Jon would be able to convince everyone to be fine with this on the basis that the wildlings have a very colorful background, and the giants and the children of the forest used to coexist. But Bran would most likely see the child of the forest using their magic in a deadly way, and possibly restarting the whole undead conflict again if their life was in jeopardy. I think this would naturally lead to Bran wanting to take measures to exterminate this threat, while Jon would not want that to happen and would protect the last remaining child of the forest. Given that Jon doesn't actually know that the children of the forest created the Night King, since Bran never publicly said that. He thinks they banded together with the First Men to fight a common enemy. So for their scene, Jon would definitely attempt to be friendly, and they also share a common ground in the sense that they both know Bran. The ending of their scene would essentially be Jon promising to take care of them. You may be thinking that it's absurd to pit Bran and Jon against one another, but I don't think it would be that unrealistic. Bran has detached himself from actually being Bran Stark, and is now the Three-Eyed Raven. He's really cold to his own lifelong friends, and he literally discarded Mira without a second thought. So I don't think it'd be out of the question for Bran to turn against Jon to potentially subvert another world-ending threat. And who knows, maybe there's more that the Child of the Forest can do that we don't know about yet. Narratively, I think this could be an intriguing avenue, and is deeply ironic that Jon and the Free Folk are reverting back into being villainized monsters. This would be a gutting tragedy watching history repeat itself, and there could also be a political reason for Bran doing this, in which he's losing some support given that he isn't kind or empathetic in any way. To subvert that and gain more support, he paints the Free Folk as the enemy since they're colluding with the species who created the Night King, unifying everyone against a common enemy. This would also create a lot of turmoil amongst pre-established characters like Tyrion being against this, and Sansa definitely being conflicted, but at the same time, shackled by the burden of defending the North at all costs. She could maybe see where Bran is coming from, but doesn't agree with declaring Jon as the enemy. And Bran himself probably doesn't think that Jon is a bad guy, but through his association with protecting the child, he has to be dealt with. I know I'm roping other characters into the Jon Snow sequel, but I wouldn't want to give them major roles and would only really come in as brief appearances besides Bran obviously, who I'm essentially setting up as being the villain of the story. But like Game of Thrones, the villains are of course very complex, and this isn't a black and white situation. Two other characters from Game of Thrones that would undoubtedly play major roles in the sequel would be Brienne and Podrick, since they're part of the Kingsguard and will be the primary characters who carry out the King's commands. This leads up into the middle of Act 2, where Bran comes north to negotiate with Jon. I think this initial dialogue scene could be very interesting and laced with tension. At first, their dialogue opens with not much hostility, and they attempt at being peaceful, but since Bran isn't exactly socially astute, like in his dialogue scene with Sansa, he ends up calling Jon naive for thinking that the child wouldn't use their powers in a negative way, and Bran brings up past examples of Jon being naive in his life, one of which being him thinking his relationship with Ygritte would work out. This angers Jon, and any connection they had instantly dissipates and turns into molten hostility. From here, Bran would deliver an ultimatum for Jon where he has a week to decide between having the Free Folk be decimated by the crown or hand over the child to be slaughtered. A sacrifice in his eyes that is ultimately worth it, and Bran could be genuinely confused by why Jon wants to stand up for this child who's so dangerous. But Jon, given that he's this noble character bound by honor, made a promise to protect this child and will not give them up, alluding back to how influential Ned was on Jon, and he in general wants to give this child a chance to live. So Bran leaves with the threat of returning with a greater force. After this, there'll be some major dialogue scenes like more infighting and turmoil amongst the Free Folk community. I can see Tormund championing that just the mere thought of them being reduced back to hated wildlings is disgusting, and he'll fight no matter what the reason is, to defend his community once again just like the past. This is why I can see the free folk not immediately rejecting the child of the forest, since their hate of being resubjected to this enemy beyond the wall is unacceptable, and the child is kind of the personification of an outcast, just like them in the past. So they'd be hypocrites if they were to reject the child. And this would be Jon's primary argument in this dialogue scene, while also instilling a sense of nobility amongst his people like a good leader. Then on the other side of the coin, Bran would go back to Castle Black briefly, and a great direction would be a division between Podrick and Brienne, and this would be expressed through an emotional dialogue confrontation. In this scene, Podrick reveals that he agrees with Jon's philosophy while Brienne does not, since she generally treats vows and oaths as being sacred and also personally agrees with the notion that the Child of the Forest could pose a major threat to Westeros. This kind of harkens back to Brienne's dialogue scene with Jaime, in which killing one individual, the Mad King, ends up saving an entire city. Knights don't have the luxury of being put into simple situations, and sometimes innocents will die either way. So she can apply this same logic to killing the Child of the Forest, along with the notion that by virtue of allowing the child to stay alive, that in turn threatens the Stark children once again, jeopardizing her promise to Catelyn. Also, I think sending Brienne down a path of realizing that the glory of being a knight is a facade and is only propagated by falsehoods and lies. That glory can be achieved, but there are too many scenarios where there isn't a clear right and wrong decision. This sentiment has been embedded in the back of her mind since the bath scene with Jaime, and she at first was reluctant to believe this, but through time, has been seeing the truth. To punctuate this, I'd open the King's Landing subplot with a montage of Brienne carrying out executions, and in general doing things that she isn't really proud of, further pushing her into being more worn down and not being as bright and optimistic as she used to be. This contrasts with Podrick, who is younger and is more optimistic and naive. He's at a similar point in her past where he thinks that knights can operate in a clean, noble status, no matter what. So Podrick will have a harder time accepting killing the Child of the Forest. With this division in place, Podrick turncoats and leaves Castle Black in the middle of the night. This kind of mirrors season 1 of Game of Thrones, where Jon leaves the Night's Watch and was convinced to stay. However, Podrick commits to leaving. Podrick goes to Jon and essentially gives him a heads up as to what Bran has in store, which partially gives their side an advantage. This would essentially be leading into Act 3, and there can definitely be some more dialogue scenes, like a scene between Bran and Brienne, and some more scenes within the Free Folk, and now Podrick being in the midst of everything. This would also naturally mirror Mance accepting Jon, and Podrick is also someone coming from Castle Black declaring his support for the Free Folk. You might be seeing the common overarching theme here of history tragically repeating itself in unintended ways. After this, each side would make their preparations, and this would lead to a battle between the Free Folk and the Crown, or brother versus brother. I won't necessarily go through every single moment of this battle, as I'm mostly pitching the story overall, but for this battle, I think the best flow would be, at first it seems like Jon is winning through him properly predicting what Bran's plan is, but the unexpected wrench that completely blindsides Jon is that Bran has control of Drogon, and drastically turns the tide of the war. The reason why Bran wouldn't lead with this ace is that he didn't want to commit to mass bloodshed and only resorted to this because he started losing the battle. And for Drogon in general, Bran kept this a secret in that when he went looking for Drogon in Season 8, he never tells anyone that he captures and wargs into Drogon, keeping him in a place in which he'll only use him in emergencies, and this is his first emergency. While Drogon spews fire on the Free Folk settlement, this would be when Brienne runs into Podrick, now on separate sides of the battlefield. At first, Brienne scoffs at the notion of fighting Podrick and tells him to submit, but Podrick doesn't and insists on not backing down, leading to a fight between Kingsguard, teacher and pupil, and friends. This would be an epic and emotional duel that's really complex since Podrick knows all of Brienne's moves and teachings, and could even use that to his advantage. The mind games and chess-like ballet between these two characters would be a sight to behold, but ultimately, I think it would be crushing if Brienne ends up killing Podrick. Just thinking about this ending between these two characters makes me emotional, and I think this gives Podrick, a character who didn't really have much depth, an iconic ending. Seeing a beloved character die at the hands of their own friend is heartbreaking, especially given the situation in which they both want to service the same ultimate goal of helping society. This would be like the Eric and Eric duel if you actually had a strong emotional investment in the characters. Like, you'd genuinely be terrified for either party winning in this duel, since both Brienne and Podrick are lovable characters. And while this is all going down, the spectacle will be euphoric as Drogon is lighting up their surroundings. And I would probably set this battle during sunset. To me, this would most definitely be the closest to the peak you can get for a sword duel. Strong emotional investment, great characters, awe-inspiring spectacle, and two skilled swordsmen leading to outstanding choreography. After Brienne tragically kills Podrick and confronts Jon, Jon reveals that there's no more point in fighting because the Child of the Forest has made their escape with Torment. Jon is captured and becomes Bran's prisoner, and I love a callback here where Bran quotes Stannis when he defeats Mance and says, "It is customary to kneel when surrendering to a king," and in response Jon would say, "We do not kneel," kind of acknowledging that Bran is directly referring to his past because he can. This wouldn't feel jarring because Bran can actually see these past memories, unlike other characters like Dany, who directly quotes past lines somehow in Season 7. This will be the primary ending, however, the epilogue will have a massive cliffhanger. Tormund and the Child of the Forest finally stop after running for hours, and they settle next to a weirwood tree, a place that the children of the forest feel at home and is most familiar to them. While they're relaxing by the tree and Tormund is drinking water, he suddenly gets impaled through the heart with a dragon glass dagger. The Child of the Forest sees that humanity is cursed by a perpetual plague of hatred, and even living peacefully, you can't escape from this. So the child unleashes their magic and makes a brand new threat. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Ideally, I wouldn't want to just create a second carbon copy Night King, and would like to have a different style of threat and or magic applied here to make things more fresh and original, as there's still a lot we don't know about the capabilities and magic that the children possess. And the second thing here is that I'm killing Tormund, which will probably get me shanked because he's a fan favorite character. But I think this would be a great ending for him, and he wouldn't technically be gone since he's now an Armageddon level villain. Instead of seeing this as an ending, it's a new beginning. And who knows, maybe he's still able to talk and has some semblance of his personality remaining, but is being controlled by the child. This wouldn't be where Tormund's story ends, and if anything, imbues a character with great importance who is kind of stagnating into bland comedic relief territory. Also, to make this ending even more gutting, I would want to give Tormund a family, and he has little kids now, which would be shown in Act 1, so his loss is felt even more. But yeah, that's my story treatment pitch for the Jon Snow sequel, and there's definitely more detail to be gone into, like creating more wildling characters, since there's a lot of opportunity to create colorful and unique individuals. I'd genuinely be interested to write a script for this, and this also opens up the possibility for more, like a trilogy or additional seasons. I have an idea of where the story goes from here, but I'm only pitching the first part of it. So hey, Warner Bros, hit me up, I'll gladly write this story. If you guys like this video, I also did the same with Bran in my Fixing Bran video, where I pitched an entire alternate story arc for his character that includes time travel, a reworked long night, and an extended ending for Season 8. This would make a great second viewing, and I also have my Discord, Letterboxd, and Patreon links in the description. Thank you so much to my top patron, Logan Farmer.